Okay, we got it. Yep. Yeah, that one is just so old, I don't know. Well, changing to my laptop that's set up properly. So you'll have it this way. Now you can either use a clicker or you can just, you know.
No, I'll probably use a clicker.
Yeah, whatever you're comfortable with. So you see. And then,
and there it is.
And there it
next
is.
to me there on that side.
Yeah.
I can do that. All right, so let me just be sure that these are all. Oh, but it's not working.
Well, this thing's seeing it. I can see this
Wait a
clicking.
minute, this is not in there right. No, it's in there right. Not doing it.
Huh. And yet I see this seeing it, so I don't know why. Maybe because I have it on. Okay, try that. There we go, just because I was trying to fool with it.
Oh.
Thought it was a little bright when you see it on the screen. So I was trying to.
Yeah, back. So that I can see which one is up. Yeah, okay.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah. That works.
I just got to run down and turn on the 2494 thing, but I'll wait a couple minutes.
All right, and I'm just checking the margins. Checking the margins. Yeah, that's all right. That's good enough. Okay. Oh, well, that's good. And I think there's music or something on this afternoon, too. I heard them talking about.
It's impossible to find a time that does not conflict with something. I kind of given up. It's nice. Martha's got a good attitude. She just says it's a buffet. You're not supposed to be able to get to everything.
Why is this in here? This doesn't belong there. This doesn't belong there. That. Oh, wait a minute. I know. It's at the end. Because I repeated that one slide and it took another slide too, and I thought, well, where'd that come from? All right.
Turn off everything. We're on the air already, so.
Okay. Okay. I thought I could get it to work if I put it over on the chair, but it's too far away
You
for
won't
it
be
to
able see
click.
that. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I could see what was coming up next, but it won't click.
Oh, should click
Yeah.
that little
Yeah.
distance.
And what did you say, if that doesn't work, is use this?
Yep,
Just that?
yep, but you gotta do the mouse. So
Oh,
just use your
oh.
finger on there, yeah. So,
Okay.
and then back.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna use the clicker.
Yeah.
Hello, John. The first of my posse. There may be two. A posse. We need posses. How are you?
No? Oh, you know what, I guess, but it's okay. I set my book apparently on a clicker. You're still good. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, thank you for coming. I think a few more people will be coming in, but before Monica's talk, I wanted to just give a quick announcement. I have we were working on an advocacy against family detention. And so we've been through Network Lobby, we're doing you write your message on a paper doll, and then we're going to pack them all up and mail them, and they'll be hand delivered next week to our senators and to our congressperson. And I have that stuff set up on a table in the cafe. If afterwards you want to go over and fill one out, please feel free. Thank you. And here's Monica.
Oh, thank you, Holly. Holly said I didn't need any introduction. But you know who I am, most of you, and I know who you are. And happy to be here, and welcome to those who are in live stream today, and those who will probably be watching this on the website after. If you need to know where I fit in or what that is, I'm a retired professor from the English department at Nazareth University. And I've been working on Thomas Merton stuff for probably 20 years. And when I was asked to do a part of this February session on racism, I suggested this as a title, thinking of men and women who are the advanced people for rock groups. They check it all out. And I want you to think of Thomas Merton as an advanced man for social justice. And I'll try to explain that later, but not right now. And most of you who know anything about Merton will know something about his life, and that he was considered probably the most important 20th century spiritual writer. But I'm just going to give you a thumbprint, quick overview of his life, because that's not what today's talk is about. So, born in Prades, France, both parents were artists. They returned to the States when the war started, World War I. His mother died when he was 6. Father back to France to do some more painting. Merton was in school, both in France and in England. His father died when Merton was 15. He had a scholarship to to Clare College at Cambridge, and his first year of college was a bit of a disaster, and you probably know some young folks whose first year at college was not stellar. So he comes back to the States, goes to Columbia, makes firm friends with 5 or 6 guys who become very supportive of his life. He's reading and very curious about things, very restless, decides after he's read a biography of Jared Manley Hopkins that maybe he should become a Catholic. He goes down the street to Corpus Christi Church to ask the priests for instructions, becomes a Roman Catholic, still restless. One of his professors suggested he go to Gethsemane in Kentucky to make a Holy Week retreat. And that was a magic moment for him. He felt that that's where he belonged, that he loved the ritual. He loved getting up at 2:15 in the morning to say lauds and vigils, and eventually found his way back to the monastery in 1941, and felt that he finally was now enclosed in the 4 walls of his new freedom. But Merton doesn't stay static with that point in his life. That doesn't sound like much freedom to me, to be enclosed in 4 walls in a monastery. And so there are things in his life that I want to talk about today that become some moments of spiritual inspiration for him. But in the years that he's in the monastery, he's doing writings on prayer and contemplation And in the last 4 years of his life, he's allowed to live somewhat full-time in a hermitage on the grounds. And the new abbot at that time allowed him to go to Bangkok, Thailand, where there was a meeting of religious superiors from all over the world, and Merton was accidentally killed there. Not by anyone, but the electricity failed when he was coming out of the shower. So his life ended at age 53. But my purpose today is to highlight some moments that had what I would call a transformative effect on his life and writing, and particularly social justice. So I want to start with this quote that's in the beginning of New Seeds of Contemplation. And I think it's a guiding principle for Merton. Every moment and every event in every man's life, you'll have to excuse the sexist language, this is 1960s, every moment and every event on earth plants something in his soul. And that's what I want to talk about today and just share with you some of those plantings that took place for him. And one that people always know is a transforming moment in Merton's life is the event on 4th and Walnut Streets in Louisville. Merton was in the city for an appointment, medical appointment, and was going across the intersection that was very, very busy, and had this sense that he was not separated from these people, but that we were all interactive and interdependent. And that was a whole different sense from being cloistered in the monastery away from the world. But I want to read what he writes in his journal. In Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, which by the way has been renamed Muhammad Ali Boulevard, but there is a plaque there. In the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people, that they were mine and I theirs, and that we could not be alien to one another, even though we were total strangers. There is no way of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun. So what he was sensing was that interior divine spark in all of these people, and realizing that this was important. We were all a part of a great oneness. The writers and scholars who study Merton's works have referred to this moment as the beginning of his turning toward the world. And what he wrote from then on, and the change in his journals, indicates that he's being much more inclusive. There's a new awareness that in prayer and contemplation, he's finding God in his solitude, but he's also finding God's people. So that new inclusiveness is important. So what I want to do today is to just touch on several topics, and it will be a taste and an invitation to you to learn more. So a little bit on racism, war and peace, nonviolence, indigenous rights, language, the other, and the environment. That sounds like an entire course, but you're just going to get a little taste of each of them. So let's start with racism. In the 60s, obviously, those of you of a certain age here, and that is most of us, know about the civil rights movement and the tensions in society, the tensions in government. Merton was able to read Martin Luther King. He was aware of the bus boycott, aware of the march from Selma to Montgomery, or Montgomery to Selma. James Baldwin, he was friends with people like John Howard Griffith, who had written Black Like Me. And Merton realized that the sin of racism denies the equality of every human being. It's not a black or a white issue. It's when we confer identity, inferior identity, on another, who becomes the other. Now, he had some experience with the African American community. Before he entered the monastery, he had volunteered in Harlem at Friendship House, and he understood and had some sensitivity to working with African American people. But the civil rights movement in the 60s was definitely a time of crisis. And for Merton, he understood that integration was not mere inclusion, but it was going to require a radical change of heart. So I want to interject one thing into this civil rights movement. You will remember hearing about the 1963 bombing of the Baptist Church in Birmingham, at which the little girls who were preparing for the service were killed. In the newspaper was a photograph of Denise McNair, who was holding a doll. And I see that one. Oh, we have to go back. And that's the famous picture. Merton was so touched by this and had a sense of compassion that he wrote a poem called Picture of a Black Child with a White Doll. It was published in the New York Review of Books. And I left copies back on the cubby holes back there, a chronology of Merton's life, and also some other handouts. So if you wish to pursue that another time, you can. But what I'd like to call your attention to is what he says in the poem. He contrasts the dark eyes with the plastic glass eyes of the doll, and talks about the silly manufactured head of the doll that could soon as kill you if it could think. So he was capturing right that black and white tension. That poem has had quite a bit of travel in everybody's lifetime, and they refer to that. And there was a second poem that he wrote based on the Children's March, and some of you will remember hearing about that. The children became a kind of sense of revolt against the indignities to the black race. But they were hosed down by the police. The dogs were put upon the children, and they were taken off to a detention center. I'm sorry that sounds familiar. But his poem was set up as a parody of Little Red Riding Hood, where Grandma with the pointed teeth is the law and the police. And so there are a couple of lines that I just want to call to your attention. It begins, "And the children of Birmingham walked into the story of Grandma's pointed teeth." And there's a refrain that comes through the poem several times. "And tales were told of man's best friend, the law." So you can hear the parody and the irony that's coming through all of that. Now, Merton also was asked to write some more poetry that became the 8 Freedom Songs, and a tenor by the name of Robert Lawrence Williams wanted to have them set to music so they could be performed several places. And in the history of Nazareth University, those 8 Freedom Songs have been performed here at least twice in the last 25 years. But I said something about this poetry because I think poetry can pinpoint the truth in ways that maybe essays can't. But during this time of civil rights unrest, Merton was aware of the arrest of Martin Luther King and his letter from Birmingham jail, and his defense of nonviolent protests against segregation, with Martin Luther King saying, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," and that we have a moral duty to disobey unjust laws. Merton responded by writing 4 different letters to a white liberal. And by that, he really means all of us. He echoes Martin Luther King and argues that unjust laws must be disobeyed and that the Negro problem is a white problem, systemic racism. And he has 4 points in these series of letters, so I'll just kind of identify what they are. We have a Christian responsibility to respond to and recognize the human dignity of every person. We have to confront our overprivilege. We are intertwined with militarism and think about profits before people. We are called to a radical transformation of society, and whites learn from African Americans. We are imprisoned in a belief that we are racially innocent. Those are tough words. Those are tough words. Merton has other essays that are collected in a volume called Faith and Violence, and another one, Seeds of Destruction, in which the title is Religion and Race in the United States. And he says that we are at a moment of kairos, a moment that could be serious change, but maybe the moment has passed. So there's a sadness there. And another essay called The Hot Summer of '67, in which he sees the Black Power movement is not the answer, that Christians need to seek out effective, authentic ways of peace in the midst of violence. Now, Merton was in touch with many of the people involved in the protests during the Civil War time, and also in contact with Joan Baez and her commitment to peace, and Martin Luther King, and he had proposed a summertime retreat at the monastery to be in the summer of '68. Alas, Martin Luther King was assassinated on April 4th of that year, and by December 10th of that year, Merton himself had passed away. So I think this whole issue of racism that he was opening up to us through his writing and the poetry is only the beginning. And I think of 2 current texts right now that address this whole issue of racism: White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo and Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. Very contemporary. But I want to turn to another topic and just broaden this idea of racism a bit to move to nonviolence, war, and peace. And the basis of this whole topic is our racial superiority. At least we think that's what it is. On the topic of nonviolence, Merton was aware of Dorothy Day, published articles in the Catholic Worker, knew the Berrigans, Dan and Philip, Etta Gulick, an international peace leader, but he also had an early interest in Gandhi in his life. When he was a 16-year-old kid in England, he read some of Gandhi and thought, how could he be right when he looks so odd? But that's a 16-year-old reflecting. But he saw that Gandhi understood what genuine spiritual fervor and action, social action, could be. And the famous Gandhi quote, "If love is not the law of our being, the whole of my argument falls to pieces." So Merton wrote a tribute to Gandhi, and he also put together a collection of Gandhi's writings and wrote a 22-page introduction to that book. So he was concerned with and springing off of the principles on war and peace and Gandhi's commitment to nonviolence. During World War II, as that was heating up, Merton registered as a conscientious objector. And his most important essay, which was published first in The Catholic Worker, is "The Root of War is Fear," in which we demonize the enemy and therefore we can do anything we want. The irony, he said, is that our moral blindness, we use peace stamps on all our letters, and yet we support with our money and tax money the production of weapons. Go figure. So he deplored the failure of theologians to speak out on the threat of nuclear war. And there were many bishops at that time that were supporting a just war theory. Cardinal and Bishop Spellman in New York City was very much pro-Vietnam at that time. This was turning Merton inside out, that the bishops were not speaking out. And he had a collection of essays that he wanted to publish called "Peace in a Post-Christian Era," that we were beyond the responsibilities of Christianity. He was very concerned about the protests for the Vietnam War, and Pax Christi was in operation at about the same time. And they asked Merton if they could put his name on the side margin as one of the supporters of Pax Christi, and he was fine with that until Roger Laporte. Does that name ring a bell? Roger Laporte poured kerosene on himself and immolated himself in front of New York City government offices. That for Merton was not an act of nonviolence, and so he had them take his name off of the letterhead. He wanted no part of that. And about the same time, he was not allowed to publish that collection of Peace in a Post-Christian Era. He was silenced by the authorities in the Trappist order because the church hadn't moved closely enough to a sense of nonviolence and peace. But you don't silence Merton. He'll obey the law, but he'll find a way to do it. And so he mimeographed letters to lots of friends, lots of people, Jim Forrest, Dorothy Day, other people that he knew in the movement, and they were collected over 111 letters between October of '61 and October of '62. Mimeographed letters that just got passed around. So he was getting his word out there. They've now been bound and referred to as the Cold War letters, and they are in a collection. So he's writing to Etta Gulick, Eric Fromm, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Ethel Kennedy, Dorothy Day, Edward Deming Andrews, Jean Gossmeyer, Gordon Zahn, James Forrest, all noted peace activists, not just in America. And these are the 4 or 5 points that he was talking about. We are in a nuclear situation that is inherently unstable. We cannot justify unintended death of millions. The policy of deterrence is inadequate. The threat to carry out an immoral act is itself immoral. Demonization of the enemy to a whole population is immoral. The passivity of citizens to allow elite decisions to be made is not good. We're shrugging and shrinking our responsibility. And the failure of Christians to engage in issues and the teaching of the church and Christ, that we're way too passive. We need to get moving. So the final analysis for him was that war was compared to an addiction, and we in the United States were involved in that addiction. When Vatican II came along, Merton wrote an open letter to the bishops in which he called for belief in the power of love to save and transform individual and society. So Merton's words and thought were actually influential in the Church in the Modern World, Gaudium et Spes, that document. So between 1959 and 68, Merton wrote 250 essays, about 10 per year, in addition to keeping a journal and keeping up a correspondence. But the underlying theme of all of it was the unity of vision, the hidden wholeness of things. So I think we could say that contemplative awareness enables us to see the oneness that we share with all God's people, and indeed with the whole of creation. So I want to make a little segue here to talk about language. Merton, because of his growing up and spending time in France, was totally bilingual in French and English. He was pretty good in Spanish and could read German. He read many of the Latin American poets and translated some of the Latin American poetry, and was asked by a gathering of young Latin American poets in Mexico City in 1964 if he would contribute something. Now, of course, he could not go, but he sent what he called Message to Poets, that's published in Raids on the Unspeakable. And he's talking to the poets about their craft. But I want you to notice how he applies, and what he says applies to the loose rhetoric that we experience on our news today. So here's what he says. Don't exploit words for ideological purpose. The importance of the immediacy of the experience, capture that in your words, and maintain a certain marginality, like a reporter. There has to be a distance, no bias. And he uses at the end of that letter the Sufi image of the dervishes who are totally involved in their experience, and says that in the waters of life, we need to be dancing like a dervish. Okay, that's on language, but let me go back to some of these themes, and I want to move to language, to indigenous rights. Merton was captured by anthropology and read as many books as he could on that, and he was reading about the Yanni Indians who were wiped out, genocide, after 12 years in hiding in the northern part of California and Washington and Oregon. The Yanni Indians lived there, but of course, Anglos were encroaching upon their territory, so they moved back, so that they could preserve their culture. When the last living fellow, Yanni Indian, was there, they finally captured him, and they took him to a museum, because now we've got, a circus character. But they were very respectful of him and allowed him to be kind of the night watchman and the environmental agent there in the cleaning up the museum at the night. But he finally got Anglo diseases and died. Merton read this book about his life and was just absolutely enraged at the loss of the individual and the tribe, and so he wrote a tribute. And the first word of that tribute is, genocide is a new word. So he retells the story of the Yanni Indian and the ethnic cleansing and compares it to what's going on in Vietnam with our napalm and wiping out villages and moving in. That if we call somebody the other, that gives us permission to destroy them. And the final irony of his essay is the last line, which is this. Ishi simply means man. So this lone survivor that they all refer to as Ishi, Ishi, come here, Ishi, do this. He never revealed his personal name. He gave them only the generic Ishi, means man. He preserved his personal dignity to the end. That impressed Merton a great deal. But notice how his work with indigenous people, and he has several essays about that. Notice how that fits in with racism and nonviolence and war and peace. So I want to say a little bit more about discovering the other. In a letter to June Jungbute, Merton says that the other, the thought of the other, is central to his thought. And he has a long essay in which he talks about a geographical pilgrimage, which is really symbolic of a spiritual journey. So this long essay has several sections to it. He talks about Abraham as the quintessential pilgrim moving to a new land. He talks about the Irish and their fondness for peregrinatio, of taking themselves off in a boat looking for the place of resurrection. He talks about the Crusades, where people went as a form of penance, and then they also got in trouble by killing people. He talks about the West as a land of promise, and that what we need to be doing is integrating the inner and outer life. Well, think about all the people who go on the Camino path these days. What are they doing? They're looking again to integrate their inner and outer life. The end of that essay has the key sentence, which is a little bit long, and here it is. If we can voyage to the ends of the earth and there find ourselves in the aborigine who most differs from ourselves, we will have made a fruitful pilgrimage. We will see the stranger we meet there is none other than ourselves, which is the same as saying that we find Christ in him. There it is in a nutshell. Now, Merton was longing for more times of contemplation and solitude. He didn't want to be always tied up in the business of writing, and asked to have some time in the hermitage, and was allowed the last 4 years of his life to live part-time and then full-time in a hermitage on the grounds of the monastery. And Miguel Grinberg, who's an Argentinian poet, asked him if he would write something about his life, his day. So the day in the hermitage, which he calls the day of a stranger. Again, always feeling himself marginalized by choice so that he can see better. So we can think of it, it's a little small book, as a great nature essay, but it's really an insight into his commitment to contemplation. It's grounded in his love of Thoreau and gives chronologically some of the things that happen in the course of his day in the monastery. But this is the opening of it. The hills are blue and hot. There is a brown, dusty field in the bottom of the valley. I hear a machine, a bird, a clock. The clouds are high and enormous. Through them, the inevitable jet plane passes. Now, it starts out looking very nice at nature there, but then the plane that he's referring to is the SAC plane. He's near Fort Knox, and the Strategic Air Command are running drills all the time, so that the SAC plane going through is always an interruption in that place. He says, I look up out of the woods directly at the closed bay of the metal bird with the scientific egg in its breast, a womb easily and mechanically opened with a bomb inside. But he also talks about the ecological balance, that he knows the pairs of birds that are around, but also the mental ecological sense of all of the authors that he has brought with him, the poets, and that their spirits are there. So the sense of wonder in the woods is also balanced by needing to empty the coffee grounds into the compost, and also he's very concerned about the rituals of daily life as well as these phrases that are wonderfully poetic, and that is the snake that is in the outhouse. And so he has to be very careful every time he goes out to use the jakes, opens the door and says, "Are you in there, you bastard?" So Merton is both, okay? The poet and also the practical man. So let's look at some larger environmental issues. And probably this is as important in Merton's life as Fourth and Walnut and his sense of being related to all of the people there. And this is when he reads Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. Now, it had come out in 1963 monthly in the New Yorker, chapter by chapter. It was published by Houghton Mifflin in the fall of '63. By January of '64, just a few months later, Merton has a copy of it. He asked someone who visited the monastery, would they get that for him? And in reading it, he writes a 2-page letter to Rachel Carson, and there are copies of it that back in the little cubby holes there if it's something that you want to take a look at. In which he says that Rachel Carson, in talking about the danger of DDT, has not just named one thing, but has offered evidence for the diagnosis of the ills of our society. It's a pattern that we use our awful irresponsibility with which we dare to use our titanic power that threatens not only civilization, but life itself. And if you've read Silent Spring in the last 20 years, you know she's talking about all of the things that are involved. The air, the soil, the water, everything is tainted by that. And Merton says to her, man's vocation is to be in the cosmic creation as the eye in the body, part of nature, and he transcends it. But man has lost his sight and is blundering around aimlessly in the midst of the wonderful works of God. And then he mentions, we say the Japanese beetle is no good for us, and by calling it the other, we can wipe it out. So I see an insight here that Merton's compassion is broadening beyond people now to the earth itself. And by the time he gets to the end of his life, I would claim that he is advocate for planetary justice. He doesn't use that word, but it's there. So I have to talk to you about these letters. I guess I need to back up one. The letters to Barbara Hubbard, who is a futurist that lives in New York, and she wants to know from Merton, so what's going to happen in the next century? Where are we going? Are we going to be living on other planets? What's your vision for the future? And he is quite sharp in his response, in which he says, look, there are two approaches. There's the millennial consciousness and the ecological consciousness. The millennial consciousness says technology can do everything, just put everything away and start anew, and we're off on a whole new pattern. In other words, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Forget everything. That's all the past. Move on to the future. The ecological consciousness, on the other hand, says be aware. We belong to a community of living beings who deserve our respect, and the whole community goes forward, and this will be. So as he's thinking about ecological consciousness, that's not a phrase that he created, but he starts writing after these letters to Barbara Hubbard. He's reviewing a book called The Wild Places. That's a book review of Roderick Nash's Wilderness and the American Mind. And the Nash book talks about the Puritans and how they misused the environment. Thoreau, John Muir, and Leopold, who created what is the basis of the land ethic that we have in the United States, which we don't always abide by, but it's this, from Aldo Leopold. A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It's wrong when it tends otherwise. Well, that doesn't give you a whole lot of wiggle room to do what you want to do. So Merton felt that the war on creation was simply another form of war on other people, the defoliants and the chemical agents in Vietnam. And he says Catholic theology ought to take note of the ecological conscience and do it fast. Okay, so let's sum up what we've said and where we've been. I entitled this as The Advance Man for Social Justice. Merton in the 1960s was way ahead of his time. We're still struggling with all of those same topics. We're at a different place in the struggle, but he had a sense of it. Now underneath I said prophet for social justice. Prophet does not see the future. The prophet sees the reality of now and asks the hard questions. And I think that's the gift to us of Merton, that he was asking the hard questions. So, he says, contemplation is the highest form, expression of man's intellectual and spiritual life. It is life itself, fully awake, fully active, fully aware that it is alive. It is spiritual wonder, spontaneous, awe, vivid realization that life and being in us proceed from an invisible, transcendent, and infinitely abundant source. So contemplation is life itself. So that might raise the question for you and me, can we be not advance men for social justice, but can we be prophets of social justice? And I think we'd have to imitate some of the things of Merton. Deepen our spirituality, take a long, loving look at reality. It's a phrase that comes from Walter Burkhardt. The daily news, what's out there, the voting redistricting, ICE, violence, the rhetoric of lies and hatred that we see, the immigration, the dignity of the person, the data centers that are pushing out the natives and their rights, denial of climate change, all of the current things that we are facing. We need to take that long, loving look at reality. And then Merton would say, as a human, as a Christian, we have a responsibility to participate. And then I would add that restlessness that Merton felt as a young kid throughout his life, we can make that into a productive restlessness and action, be it resistance or moving topics forward. He says, all those people at 4th and Walnut were walking around, shining like the sun. Well, you're already doing that. And don't forget that every moment and every event of every life on earth plants something in your soul. Bring it to harvest. Where to find more Merton stuff? I left a copy of that on the back table. So I hope I gave you a little taste of some topics without delving into them totally, because there's certainly more that could be said. I invite you to take one of those papers if it's useful to you on where to find Merton's writing, and some of his works are now downstairs in the library as of 2 days ago. So feel free to get that. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you are uncomfortable. So as you go out shining like the sun, figure out what it is you can do to contribute to moving all of us toward a humanity that is full, active, embracing others, and helping move us forward in the right direction. Amen. I believe this is the end of the February series. Is that correct? Do we have plans for March or April? You do. And Holly will let us know when they are firmed up.
I will put that up. Nothing next week. Not March 2nd, but March 9th we start at.
Okay, 1 o'clock on Mondays. Okay, okay. I've retrieved my little gizmo.